So the first kind of variation that we'll look at on a plain weave is what's called a seersucker or a slack tension weave. So Lynn, you come from fashion, so you maybe have seen a seersucker suit, those really lightweight cotton suits for summer. Typically they're like this blue and white ticking, and they're just really kind of cool and airy. But what I want you to look at today in terms of weave is this idea of what slack tension means. So last week we looked at what a basic tick weave was. It was a type of basic weave that created this very kind of thin and thicker line stripes. So just a basic weave. But to create that kind of wrinkled effect that's associated with a seersucker, what happens is that the warp yarns are puckered, and they're puckered because the threads are pulled. Okay, so they're pulled, and it creates this puckering effect. So if you just kind of think about a fabric on the loom, and you begin just to pull one direction of the fabrics, you're going to get that wrinkled effect. So that is what we mean when we say a slack tension weave, such as a traditional seersucker. So the next weaves we're going to look at are called Dobby weaves. So today we're going to look at weaves that are created on a Dobby loom and a jacquard loom. So the Dobby is the name of a loom type or attachment that weaves small geometric designs such as squares and diamonds. So here's the difference between a Dobby and a jacquard loom. So when we get to jacquard, like big, beautiful tapestry designs, those are large scale. So they require a large harness or a large loom. So Dobby looms are smaller. The maximum size is 32 inches. So although they create these intricate designs and complex designs, they're often very small and geometric. So when we look at both the Dobby loom and the jacquard loom, so early jacquard looms use something similar to what old computers used to use, like a punch tape. And a perforated tape or electronic tape today can be used to control the action of the harness. So you'll kind of start to see what I mean as we go through the slides. But if you think about a traditional tapestry weave, which we'll look at in a minute, that was traditionally woven by hand, that could have taken years to weave because they're very complex. One color on the warp on the weft stops and starts. Okay, so they stop and start and go, and another color comes in, and it's very complicated. So today, what I want you to know that today these looms are computer generated. So basically it says row 5, go over 10 slots, stop. Color 5, go over 6 slots, stop, go under. So it tells it exactly what to do and how to weave. So that's why we're getting more and more complex weaves. It's because of, and affordable, relatively affordable, is because of the computer or electronic tape harnesses and looms. That might be a little out of order. Look at some examples of Dobby weaves. So in example 70 in your book, you're looking at example of different weaves, and they're going to fall under the category of piqués. Now, in the Midwest, I hear them called picks. I know that my design assistant always called them these little picks. And these are created on the Dobby loom, so you can see their geometric patterns. But there's something really kind of special about piqués. It's that they have almost a quilted effect. So something like a honeycomb example, a bird's eye example, or this waffle cloth. So a couple things that I want you to observe that I don't feel that your samples really kind of do justice in the book is that this complicated weave. So let's just look at the waffle cloth, for example. So it's a square, it's small, but there's several layers of these squares that are built up on top of each other. So I know you're listening out there. So what does a waffle look like, right? A waffle looks like it has those highs and lows. So a waffle cloth created on this Dobby loom has that effect. So it has this really nice textured surface and raised effect. Number 72 in your book, it is a waffle cloth. If you look very closely, it has that surface. It's a waffle cloth with a little bit of almost looks like a bird's eye width in it. But I just kind of wanted to show you where I see it more as an interior design. You know, for cotton cloths to maybe dry your dishes, or a mat in the bathroom, or even towels, like high-end towels could be this kind of nice waffle cloth texture. Unlike your examples, when you look at examples 70 and 71, don't look at the print. All right, don't look at the print. You should be looking at that raised piqué effect, or pick as my Midwest friends call it. That really nice texture effect. So nice stability. So don't look at the print as much as you're looking at that texture that's created from the Dobby loom. So where do we use these as designers? We're going to look at piqués and matelassé designs because they have this kind of nice quilted effect and texture, but not too heavy. So they're not actually padded and quilted. These are perfect for like coverlets for bedding. So I use these a lot, especially for children's rooms, nurseries, where you really kind of want to get that nice, charming texture and effect. So I do use these because I do like the texture of these weaves. So here are some other examples of Dobby weaves. Swatch number 73, it's called a goose eye twill. So last week you learned about a twill, right? Creating that angled effect. You learned about the herringbone pattern, that if you alternate the twill effect, you've got that zigzag effect that looks like the spine of a fish. Well, this is a weave that even gets more complicated, and that is the goose eye. Sometimes it's referred to as the God's eye. So I see this pattern a lot around, you know, Christmas. It is based on the twill, but it has to be created on the Dobby loom to get that effect. So again, small scale. I think the sample in your textbook, sample number 73, is a great example of what that looks like. It's very nice, kind of has a nice heavy weight to it, as do most of the ones that we'll be looking at today. So number 74. So the reason why this is placed under the Dobby section here, what we want to point out is that sometimes there is a plain weave, which you can see in sample 74 in gray, or black, I should say, but then another set of weaves has to go on that to create the stripe. So I'll just read the description. And here's what this might look like, where two different types of weaves to create an effect. Striped satin is a Dobby because the design is made of two different weaves. The stripes are a raised satin. So if you have that sample with you, you can see it's raised over that plain weave, while the ground meaning base, is recessed in a plain weave. So it takes two different types of weaves to create that effect. So therefore, this was done on the Dobby. Number 75 is called a momi or a crepe weave. And here's a little bit of where there might be a confusion. So if any of you have worked in fashion or have sewn your own garments, this does not look like a crepe. So typically crepes are for gowns and bridesmaid dresses, that very kind of nice, sheer, beautiful, kind of almost chiffon looking kind of crepe fabric. This, what you want to look at, in terms of interior design, when you hear the word crepe, this is exactly what it looks like in Swatch 75. It's this very pebbled effect. So instead of creating something geometric, the Dobby loom is creating something very interlacing, dense, and more random. It's called a crepe weave. And you're going to see these quite a bit in commercial design. So if you think about a desk chair, and maybe it comes with 5, free sample, free weaves that it could come in, not COM, but just regular. It comes in. It's often in like a green crepe, a red crepe, a gray crepe, etc. So it's just a little confusing because it looks quite different than how you've seen it in fashion. But in interior design, crepe is a good choice for upholstery. So next we have in samples 76 and 77, we have something called extra yarn weaves. And in sample 76, you have a basic red and cream tick fabric, just basic little nice tick. But, someone real cutesy wants to write some text wording down the line if you don't have the sample, like kiss the cook. That's what it says, kiss the cook. And so you can't weave in kiss the cook on a plain weave. So you need some extra yarns being put in there to add that extra detail. So that's an example of an extra yarn. In this example that I'm showing you here, looks like something kind of like a burlap or a really dense weave. And then some dots or some circles for interest we're adding to it. So here you can see, just kind of take a look at this because this is really important. This is not embroidered. I really want you to take a look at this. These dots are not embroidered, but they're actually extra yarns that are floated across the loom, brought up to the surface to create the design, and then float across the back. So here you're looking at the front of the textile. And here you're looking at the back. So for example, if this was the weft yarns on a loom, the color would go along the back and then come up to the front to create the dot, then go back around the back until it comes up to the front again. So those are those floating yarns that you're seeing on the back. So real kind of important to remember. In sample 77, what they're showing you is what's called a clip. And in a clip, those float yarns are being cut so that you don't see these long floats on the back, but instead they're being clipped or cut. And so if you don't have the sample, I'm looking at a little flower, and around the flower you see something that looks kind of fuzzy, like a little caterpillar. It's not a caterpillar or a chenille, it's rather these little floats that have been clipped. So typically in our book, we want to put the true side face up. So I feel like it was just a process where the floats were probably on the front of the textiles and then clipped so that we can kind of keep that effect. In this example, but normally you just see, and I'll tell you why, normally if you look at the back of something, you see that they are clipped on the back. Because what happens, you guys, is as you're sewing, let's say I'm making something a window treatment, and it has all these little things floating along the back. It gets caught in our sewing machine. So it actually, we do see that often, that they either maybe put another kind of backing on it or they clip them, because it does get kind of gnarly with our sewing machines. Another thing that I've done with a mistake, So let me look at another sample. So there's a Swiss dot. So I have made window treatments, like for kids' rooms that have cute little dots on it. And I've made like a valance for it for a kid's room or something. And with the light passing through, even with a lining, you can see those floating yarns, and it looks really ugly. So something to consider kind of when you're specifying these fabrics. Just take a look at the back and see how that is. Hold it up to the light, because that is something that I've had in the past as a problem. So next we're going to look at complex weaves woven on the jacquard loom. A jacquard attachment on a loom makes it possible to produce any design, however intricate, since each warp yarn can be controlled separately for each insertion of the weft through automatic control of raising the warp yarns. Jacquard loom is considered the first computer punch card prototype. So I'm going to have you think about an old Victorian piano. And I want you to think about the sheet that has all those little punctures in it. And as that turns, as the sheet turns, it tells the piano which key to go down. So if you've ever seen an old piano, like if you've been to Tombstone and there's nobody playing there, you might have seen kind of this white piece of paper kind of moving right above the piano that's telling the piano which keys to go down. So what happens is each time it hits a certain hole, the key moves down. So that's how these early punch cards used to work. So during industrialization, the jacquard loom just became this, phenomenon, because they could really make these really complicated designs that before were only really reserved for the elite, the aristocracy, the royalty, etc. So the advent of the jacquard loom really changes the textile industry. Today, they don't use a computer punch card or that same kind of punch card that the piano used to use, but rather it's computer generated.